Good evening. Welcome to the Engaged Community Series, a joint initiative by the South Asian American Policy and Research Institute, SAAPRI, and the South Asian American Justice Collaborative, SAAJCO. For those unfamiliar with the organizing partners, SAAPRI is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization established in 2001. Through community-based research and strategic partnerships, SAAPRI drives impactful policy change at local, regional, and national levels. It is dedicated to empowering South Asian Americans by advancing data equity and ensuring our communities are accurately represented in public policy. SAAJCO is a civil rights nonprofit committed to advancing the civil and human rights of the South Asian diaspora in the United States through impact litigation and community engagement. We'd also like to thank the Saba Foundation in Diaspora and Saba North America for their generous support of this series. The Engaged Community Series is designed to create space for South Asians and allies to access knowledge, exchange ideas, and connect with resources that support justice and equity. Before we dive in, a quick note. This session is being recorded and will be available afterward on SAAPRI and SAAJCO's platforms. Please feel free to share any and all questions using the Q&A function or chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. So today's conversation. My name is Sufyan Sohel, and I am a civil rights attorney here based in Chicago. I'm so excited to be here with you all. This is the last of the Engaged Community series, and it's going to be a great one. Our theme is civic responsibility and activism. How do we mobilize communities for lasting change? And it comes at a moment when civic life feels both urgent and uncertain. Across the country, we're seeing attacks on voting rights. Immigrant communities are under threat. Protest movements are being criminalized. And there's a growing sense of disconnect between people and the systems meant to represent and serve us. But at the same time, we're witnessing something else. Communities are organizing, grassroots movements are slowly shifting policy, and people are refusing to disengage. So today is not about activism in theory. It's about what it actually takes to mobilize us in our communities, especially those who are historically excluded, and how we can turn these moments of urgency into lasting change. I'm so honored to be joined by three leaders doing exactly this work. We have Mamta Gurung Nyangmi, did I say that correctly? Is the executive director of Adhikaar, where she leads grassroots organizing within Nepali-speaking immigrant communities around workers' rights, housing justice, and immigrant dignity. Her work centers building power among immigrant workers, especially women, through leadership development, policy change, and collective action. We're also joined by Mr. Ronald Claude, the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, or BAJI, where he leads work at the intersection of Black liberation and immigrant justice. A first-generation Haitian American, his work focuses on advancing rights for Black migrants through policy, organizing, and international advocacy. He has represented Black migrant communities on global stages, including testimony before the United Nations. And we're also joined by Ms. Mansi Kathuria, who's an organizer, researcher, and movement builder with over a decade of experience across political, community, and labor organizing. She's a core member of the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, ASADA. They co-lead global solidarity and membership development. And currently at UC Berkeley's Othering and Belonging Institute, Mansi supports social movements through research and narrative building centered on belonging. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I want to start with something simple but very, very important. When we say civic responsibility or activism, what does that actually mean today, and what does it mean to you in this moment? Mamta, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you, Sufyan. Hello, everybody, wherever you're joining from. Namaste, Tashidileg. I'm actually going to start by this testimonial from one of our members. As Sufyan mentioned, we are a community-based organization, grassroots. We're in Queens, New York. Shout out to that. And have been around for 2 decades now. So I'll start with this. So this is one of our members, Kalpana, who says, the work that Adhikaar does is beyond our imagination. I have been with Adhikaar since the New York Domestic Worker Bill of Rights passage passed in 2005. Today, I'm empowered and want others to be empowered too. Being empowered not only by the services, but also by taking part in Adhikaar programs, campaigns. I tell all my friends and family about their work. And most recently, I referred one individual who is a TPS, and that's the temporary protected status holder, to Adhikaar to participate, support, and encouraged her to join the TPS rally. From that day onward, she continues to be active in that group. I am proud to say that I've been well connected for a long time and have increased self development and have been empowered day by day. Again, this is just a voice of one of the many members, and in essence of Sufyan, to your question, that's what we have. We were founded on. We proudly wear the badge of honor to say we're a women-founded and only women-led organization that is working on working class, immigrant women organizing, providing services, but also looking for policy changes and bigger changes in the US. And in essence, what Kalpana speaks, that's what activism is. It has been when we started out, and it continues to be so. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much. Mansi, what does civic responsibility mean to you in this moment?
Thanks all. Excited to be here and be in this conversation. I think you had alluded to this in your introduction of, not withdrawing. I think in this moment, that is one of the biggest things for me is staying present and not giving in to the despair and the overwhelm and, kind of withdrawing from civic life and public life and relationships, but being present in whatever spaces you're in and connecting with people, and building relationships even beyond maybe who your immediate friends are, your immediate community is, but thinking bigger, thinking about your community, your workplace, your block or neighborhood, and what we can build together. And then also really foregrounding the non-cooperation. I'm sure a lot of us have kind of been in these trainings or heard about these tenets, but I think this moment is really demanding two things of us, which is to connect with people and then also to not cooperate with the systems that are pushing forward authoritarianism, that are allowing our loved ones to be kidnapped in broad daylight, or waging war on our people across the world. And thinking about all of those moments where we can resist and we can slow down those systems.
Thank you so much for that. Claude, Ronald, sorry.
No worries. Claude is still my name. Thank you. No, thank you again for having me, and welcome to everybody joining the call. I greatly appreciate the invitation. Um, I think to piggyback on what everyone has said, I think for me, when I think of civic responsibility, I think maybe I'll speak from the terms of like doing this work, being on this side of the work, right? Maybe not the folks we might be trying to ensure there's a benefit for. And I would say it's what are we doing to provide on ramps, right? I think it's very important that we try to meet people where they're at. And sometimes that means talking to our uncle or cousin who, back home, they think strong leadership that we might be seeing from this administration is something to, look to as like an example of like, yeah, that's how you get things done. And then trying to break that down, whether it's in WhatsApp conversations or across family tables. And at the same token, it's like, what are we doing to make it where it's like, hey, you can't make it to this rally, but we have this other event that we got going on that I think you would be a perfect fit. So it's on us to figure out what are the on ramps we can continue to provide folks. And then the second thing is just about um, looking at what is happening right now and focusing on political education, right? And it is our responsibility to address the issues at a holistic and intersectional approach. And what I mean by that is just looking at it like we don't have to just do immigration policy or think of immigration policy when we're trying to, impact immigrants in a positive way, right? Are we thinking of it in a holistic manner in terms of what are we thinking about in terms of housing needs. You know, folks that have kids that are, you know, their ESOL programs in their local schools are getting cut, right? So making sure that our civic duty is essentially to think of the whole person, right? It's not to just think of simply like, oh, okay, like, are we gonna get this TPS for y'all, DACA, which are very important, right? But it's like I think where we can take another step is thinking of like, oh, like how are you dealing with the government shutdown? How's that impacting all these communities that you're in? Maybe you're relying on a local food bank, right? And making sure that is also encompassed in our work if we really truly care about you know, being a net positive. So yeah, I'll say those are the things I think of when you think of civic duty. It's like, are we thinking of the whole person? And then are we providing those on-ramps for folks to meet us wherever they are in terms of their politics or, you know, even their time?
Thank you so much. I resonate that with a lot because sometimes, you know, we think of or see someone just on one identity or one struggle they may be facing and not realizing the complexity, not only on identities, but economics or housing or food or all these other barriers and challenges that our communities are experiencing. We get so siloed sometimes in our activism rather than this cross effort to really improve the holistic lives of the people we live with and around. A question for all of you is you gave great definitions of civic responsibility and activism. Would you say in the last 2, 3 years that that definition has changed for you?
I think I can jump in here. Absolutely, right? Like, you know, just by virtue of the environment we are, internally, it's still us, it's still the same community, but just by the external. So, Adhikaar, as I said, like, you know, our approach has always been services, we organize, then we advocate for changes. And we've had tremendous success in mobilizing because part of our approach has been grassroots organizing, but leadership development where our people show up. Um, just so first of all, even staff-wise, all of us are first generation immigrants, including myself. We're all in different stages of our immigration journey, lived in mixed household families. Many of us still have strong ties to family back home, you know, so then it becomes this thing of if we are feeling that fear to a certain degree, how do we now convince our members that we've relied on heavily to say, you know what, don't care about that. Like just show up and everything's going to be okay when we don't know how it's going to be. Things are changing so swiftly, just in terms of, you know, the attacks on immigrant communities, attacks on the whole nonprofit ecosystem, if you will, right? And so this is when sometimes it feels like we're living in a parallel universe. Like we have a lot, one of our strategies is also education. It's like we do a lot of know your rights education, but then you hear stories like none of that matters. You know, no due diligence is being followed, no processes are being followed. So then what does that mean, right? So it is a very confusing time for us. But regardless, I think what empowers me every day to do the work we do in the community we do is people still show up actually, you know, despite it all. Um, Sometimes the wins seem very incremental, like how we still celebrating the joys. But essentially, I mean, in the last 2 years, in the current climate that we live in, um, increasingly challenging. But like I said, you know, that also means even the smallest of victory is worth celebrating. Like it doesn't have to be, hey, now we're gonna wait for this passage of the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, which rightfully Adhikaar, with a lot of our other partners, championed that in 2010. That was huge, right? New York, being one of the first states. But there are other things, you know. So I, at least that's what I feel like coming into this space in this moment and doing the work we do.
Thank you. Mansi, Ronald, any
Yeah.
changes that you've seen over the last couple of years?
If I may, yes, you know, I agree with a lot of what was just said, and I think on top of that, I would add that, and can you guys hear me all right? My mic on my end, okay, great, perfect. So I would say it's just about what have our asks been in the last few years and how they've changed now. And I think what's encouraging is that I think everyone's realizing we didn't ask for enough. We didn't push for enough. And it sounds weird because you're looking at the dynamics that this administration has and what it looks like on the ground. It doesn't seem like the moment to be like, oh, we gonna get everything, right? But it's actually, it shows that we could have asked and elevated our request to a level of like, what is permanent? DACA, TPS are, it's funny to say, they're the ground, right? And it's hard to think about that because you're like, well, we don't even get it. Like, what do you mean? But it's that's not what's going to provide that permanent protection, and hence, that's why we call it permanent. It's like it's this pathway to citizenship, and you see now that the side that we were in struggle with has moved on to like attacking those type of things because they realize that's actually like what keeps us safe. And so I think what is encouraging and what I think has changed is you're starting to see a shift of people changing. Hey, hold on, I can increase what I'm asking for. I deserve more. I think we used a lot of words of like, dignity and we're fighting for our dignity, we're fighting for our people, etc. But now you're seeing the change from it's not just I want TPS or DACA or a worker's permit. I need something that makes it where not every election I'm gonna wonder if this person's gonna be on my side and is gonna make sure this gets renewed. It's ensuring it's like, hey, I think that these body snatchers are attached to what's happening with the police and the police brutality we saw in 2020, right? And we're starting to see people make more of those links, which I think it's encouraging because we can grab onto that and be like, yeah, this is what we need to be asking for. This is how we end up not having to wait for what a decision on the 29th to hope, fingers crossed, right? And so I think that's something that has changed, is that we are also understanding that true protections, the true needs of our communities, are things that we have to always be advocating for and not try to figure out, politically speaking, what can we get, right? And I think that's something that's growing and hopefully continues even in the midst of what all that is happening right now.
Thank you. Mansi, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what both of you shared really resonates about, just the landscape being completely different, the fear, but also, Ronald, I really like what you're saying about we need to actually think bigger. I agree with that. I think that's one of the big things that has changed for me in the past few years of like thinking about how our movements can be so much bigger. Heard in a lot of spaces folks talking about how we need to pivot and shift in this moment, and the practices that got us to this moment aren't going to be enough to get us out of this crisis. And thinking about that a lot in different parts of my work, like in Asata, we organize with progressive South Asians in the Bay Area, but also there's these huge communities of like more recent immigrants, of South Asian tech workers that are less politically engaged and historically have not been communities where Asata is really doing outreach and trying to organize. But when we look at the moment we're in and what it demands, we're like, what would it actually take for us to really shift how we are approaching this work? And what does it mean to engage folks that aren't usually the demographic of people that are naturally drawn to our organization or signing up or coming in the door excited to get involved. So I think it's really asking us to think differently and think bigger, and figure out how to make that happen, like develop new tools and strategies and relationships. So I think the definition both hasn't changed in the past few years, but everything around us has changed fundamentally.
Thank you so much. Mamta, this question is for you specifically. So for the last 10 plus years, I've led on-the-ground work here in Chicago to support communities dealing with travel ban related stuff, right? And so many, what I see a lot is oftentimes those people leading a lot of this work are the people who could be potentially impacted by this work, right? There's a lot of fear, there's risk. What does civic engagement look like, especially for immigrant communities navigating that fear or risk?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that resonates with me, right? Although I have gotten naturalized as a citizen, but I am also very aware being in the space, being vocal about it. I was like, what if I get detained? What if I can't travel to go see my mother in Nepal, right? And also because the communities that we work in and organize, Nepal, Bhutan, um, Myanmar, culturally shared also from northeast of India as well as of Tibetan descent. And many of the countries have been impacted by the travel, the 75 countries that were, including as well as the countries that got the visa. Well, there is a stay on any adjustment, but also, oh my God, I'm for the lack of word, but there is a bond that you have to pay a bond even for the non-immigration visa, right? Like students visiting family. So all of that separation happens in the current thing, what we do. But having said that, right? Uh, Take just the Nepali community, um, 80% foreign born. Many did come during a time of displacement. Many came here through diversity, visa lottery. When Adhikaar started 20 years ago, it was essentially mostly working age population, but now increasingly there's multi-generational, means people having families here, so on and so forth. Many people are also finding pathways to citizenship. So, in that sense, it's an opportunity for us to build that political power, right? Getting engaged in the census work was one good way to increase that presence, and I think that's how we've been able to civic engagement. That's a big part of the work that we do. We also have citizenship classes, online, in person, where people find us and they say, hey, how can we take these classes to apply for our citizenship, so on and so forth. So that gives us an opportunity now to do the political education, right? That becoming a citizen is not just, it's not just merely a paper, but you can actually actively take part. And this is where our strategy around the leadership development that I was mentioning earlier kind of comes in. Um, so so that I feel has been a big saving grace in many ways, especially with families that have children now that are born here, and we have youth organizing that we do, and many of our youth actually speak up for issues that are impacting their families, right? Their parents and their uncles and their aunts and their, grandmothers. So civic engagement continues to be every day. It's an opportunity just to have these conversations, and we never cease. We do that through our services. We do that through our organizing, leadership, programs, so on and so forth. And I think that's the way that we can shape about and actually bring about real impactful changes. But that being said, it is still a small population while it's one of the fastest growing subgroups within the South Asian spaces, it's still a small population nonetheless. And coalition building has been instrumental in the work that we do, building solidarity, you know. And as Ronald mentioned about the TPS, Adhikaar has been one of the founding members of Communities United for oh my God, a status protection. And that is, we have the Haitian community, we have the African communities, we have the Latino communities, and the Nepali communities, many of our countries that are affected by it. So again, solidarity, continued engagement, and coalition building.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I want to do a small shift over to barriers now. And Ronald, I'd love to start with you on helping us dissect some of the biggest structural barriers that limit civic participation or engagement that we see today.
I mean, that's a that's a large question, but
You got this. You
I
got
could,
this.
thank you. I could easily say there's a lot of barriers, right? But let's maybe break it down maybe on by like a local, state, and federal level, right?
Sure.
And so starting off in the federal side, it's just hard to get to. It's hard to reach your elected if you're not familiar with this arena, so to speak, right? And getting folks to come to DC offices, and it feels like if you don't come to the Hill, it's hard to touch base with your congressperson or catch them at maybe in their district, but at a local event where they're going to push you aside to a staffer. And so that education of it, I can't tell you how many times it's like, how are we making sure that our folks, if they even get that space with these electeds, are using it in a way that can propel their their requests or their agenda. I've been on the Hill so many times, and it's all about, sometimes unfortunately relies too heavily on sharing the narrative or the story or the trauma that they've experienced versus like the ask and the request, that it's like, hey, like, this is what's happening to me. And I guess one of the stories I'll give is that we went for someone that had been detained recently, and we were trying to get a conversation. The conversation was really about how did we get this person released, right? And it turned into, well, we can make the conditions better where they're at. And we're like, whoa, and you're sitting there. So I think a barrier is just even understanding of how to participate in that arena. How do you engage your elected? How do you push a request? Is still something I think we still have a lot of work to do with our community, but also trying to understand, it's like, okay, like, are the electeds that we're trying to reach being held accountable to what we are actually requesting? It's not about making certain terrible situations better or much more livable. It's about, are you actually understanding our requests? And if you're saying that you're experiencing a barrier towards reaching our requests, how are you engaging us in terms of what can we do to support you to, like, get us closer to that, right? And I think that's also a gap. And then on the state and local level, I think you look at the things of still be fighting for language access, right? I think that's something that, unfortunately, in the last 2 years, it's had to take it has had to go to the back burner. But are we trying to reach our people in the languages that they're speaking and they can communicate in, right? I think the other barriers to time, and that can devy into a conversation about capitalism and et cetera, and how it keeps us away. But a lot of our people, I was just in an Uber yesterday, someone that just got back, or not just got back, but found asylum from Afghanistan in the DC, and they were like, yeah, I've been working all night in Uber, et cetera. They're explaining their story, but that's what our people are experiencing. This understanding of like, hey, just to make it here, I gotta make things shake. I gotta make things move. And that's the culture and the communities we all come from too. We are gonna find a way. So even in these struggles, we're still trying to make things happen. And then you have that type of energy and that type of effort. And at the same time, we're trying to say, hey, but if you don't show up to the State House altogether, it's hard for us to show momentum for us to get these driver license for you all, or so I think that's another barrier. And then I think the final thing again, and I spoke about it a little bit earlier, is the political education piece. I think it's just, again, are what we trying to do or what we're trying to push for, is that something that is accessible to folks? It's like, okay, I need TPS, but is it accessible to them to understand that it's like, okay, TPS for Haitians or Syrians on the 29th, what does that mean for our neighbors in Cameroon or Ethiopia, etc.? It's like there's TPSs that have already been ended, and how are we making sure that they're part of this conversation, right? How is our advocacy growing there? Because if we leave some folks behind, as unfortunately it ends up happening as we try to get piecemeals or get something here or there, we are in a sense weakening our overall strategy and goals, because that's what ends up happening. It's like, oh, I'll get this for this group, or I'll get this for this, and versus like, are we all going in saying, hey, this is what we all need, this is what is going to be helpful for all of us? And so I think that's another barrier of understanding the different issues or coming together as like, are we seeing this TPS issue holistically in terms of everyone that's involved in it, not just the group that I belong to, and the fight for them to get TPS extended or a permanent protection. So those are some of the barriers that I think maybe are more heightened right now, but I would be lying if I told you that's all.
I appreciate that candor and the framing, because it's going to my next question for Mansi. Mansi, I want to talk with you a little bit about activism, right? I'm an activist. I go out on the streets. Protesting, rallying, trying to organize and mobilize people to just show up. Especially within our communities, I see a lot of apathy unless it's an issue very, very, very identity-based specific to them. I don't know if it's whiteness. I don't know if it's white adjacency. I think those are both some factors in my perspective. I think there's a little bit of fear, there's apathy, there's we did it the right way, or some social economic privilege in there. Um, Talk to me a little bit about both the challenges of why people may not activate, and also both from a fear, apathy, misinformation side, but also from like cultural, social side. Like, why do people just actively choose not, especially from our communities, choose not to engage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think everything Ronald shared is like part of the equation for sure. And even when you asked that question, I was like, yeah, time and just like the toll of capitalism on all of our lives, I think is a significant barrier. But I also resonate with, all of the things you're saying. And I've heard, I feel like all of those messages from different South Asian folks and even in different parts of the country, right? That we did it the right way. I think that's a big one. Why can't other people do that? And not just about immigration, but even this American dream, like economic mobility. I grew up around a lot of folks that are like, well, we came here with, quote unquote, nothing, which I think there's a lot to unpack there. And we're able to start a business. We're able to like work our way up the corporate ladder and kind of achieve this like middle class or upper middle class life. And I think that absolutely biases people towards feeling like everyone else is doing it wrong, just really kind of buying into that idea of personal responsibility. And I think we all know that there's so many factors into who even makes it to the US and gets those visas, and what, even how the H-1B visa program has functioned over the years, how much that's changed. And one of the things Asata Power has been, our C4 has been engaged with, is this National South Asian Coalition over the past several months, and writing this South Asian policy brief, doing a briefing on the Hill, led by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, to really talk about our community holistically. And our headline of this policy brief is that there are actually more undocumented South Asians in the United States than there are South Asians with H-1B visas. So part of it is also just this perception of who our community is that isn't always matching up to the reality. But, I think it's easy for all of us to kind of be in our bubble sometimes, or be in communities with really similar folks and not think about what else is happening in the country. And then I think there's a lot of fear, and that is influenced by so many things, which it's so valid right now, as we've been talking about on this call, but it's also informed by, people's experiences in their homeland, and seeing political turmoil there, and seeing the cost to activism in different places and different times can be really steep, the impact it can have on your life and your families. And moving to a new country, there also being, like Ronald was saying, so many barriers to understanding how these systems work. Like, I get overwhelmed by it all the time, and have been, doing movement work professionally for over a decade. But how policy moves at the local level, city, state, county, federally, and how all of those things interact can be really overwhelming. And couple that with the fear, I think there is a sense for a lot of people of just, keep my head down, go to my job, take care of my family. And it is this disconnect. And I think that's why, too, part of my answer to the like civic responsibility question was so emphasizing connecting with people in relationships, especially those that help us see how folks are having different experiences in the world, and not just getting stuck in your bubble. And I think that can really move people from that place of like fear and overwhelm to not feeling alone, which I think is the best antidote to fear, and having other people to help figure this out together with and actually move to action.
Thank you. That really resonates, and I appreciate your answers. And I want to shift now for how do we now build power and solidarity amongst communities? We look around and we watched Minnesota and ICE in our communities, and it took the murder of two white people for people to even realize that ICE was in our communities and this is how they act and treat people, right? And the number of people of color who've been impacted or kidnapped or killed doesn't really shake people up the same way. And you see it with global issues too, right? Like how we talk and approach Ukraine versus Gaza or Sudan or what's happening in Lebanon right now or Venezuela or Cuba, right? There's things people talk about and there's things people don't even, it's not even on their radar, right? Ronald, I'm going to go to you first. How do we build true cross-racial solidarity? What does it look like, not just in words, but in action?
That's a great question, and I think um, it goes back to this, the importance of intersectionality, right? And I think maybe I'll start off with an example of what we experienced specifically in the last presidential election. We felt in our communities, in terms of Black migrant communities across the country and African American communities, this specific effort to target those two communities against each other. This idea of African Americans who have been in this country, for sorry for lack of a better word, a long time, not having the ability to access housing or these supports of just like, hey, the rent is too damn high, and I'm not receiving this help that potentially I'm seeing migrants that have just arrived are receiving, right? And then saying, well, so why are they getting this effort? And vice versa, of even within our own communities of folks not understanding. It's like the idea is not to jump over to the land of milk and honey before African Americans, right? And so I think what we do is, in terms of how are we bridging that gap of understanding of like, hey, when the police stop us, they're not going to know you Nigerian, you Haitian, or you from the South Side, right? It's going to be very much, hey, this Black person, right? And we're going to have those same traumatic experiences oftentimes. So it's like, how are we making sure that it's seen as that is the connector, that our struggle is very much linked? And even when I look across, it's like and I say we in terms of Black folks, but in general, across the board, we can do better jobs of connecting the experiences that we're all facing. I think, for instance, with the Black migrant community, looking at what Southeast Asian communities experiencing in terms of the detention rates, and it's a similar experience of like the criminality, right, of being criminalized based on where you come from and your skin, the color of your skin. And so, are we making more connections and efforts to hold across our hands, be like, hey, we both need to be fighting this issue of police brutality, or how these body snatchers are expanding their efforts. I think also we that's one part. I think we have to also turn to having a global perspective again. Are we making partnerships, allyships on a global scale? We've been trying to make a concerted effort of participating in different UN mechanisms and conventions, particularly even next week. We are going to be participating at BAJI, at the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, and trying to connect the diaspora, right? Because I think what we also understand is that this experience of immigration, or what migrants are experiencing, is not just it's not just something in the U.S. Where folks, there was Black folks that were fleeing the situation in Ukraine. There's situations on the continent. Black folks in Brazil, in their experience with police brutality. So, are we making connections on a global scale, right, to build a solidarity that goes beyond just like our border, that can also elevate our issues and also show our strength, right? And so I think those are all the types of things that we need to be doing and should be doing in a moment like this, I guess, to address the struggles that we've all experiencing, and making sure that it's like our solidarity is airtight.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mamta, to you, what does it take to move people from isolation to collective action?
I think echoing what Ronald just said, it is finding common grounds, right? And what connects us. Um, yes, if we only talk about like TPS or we talk about, hey, a certain issue, however, the binding factor is immigrants. We're all immigrants here. And how does all these different, rules, policies that are being made affects us? We talk about issues not, I mean, yes, our member base come from industries that, and because it's primarily, we work with women in the care industry, nail salon industry, so on and so forth. But at the end, what we are talking about is the working class and its affordability. That affects not just the Nepali community or, South Asians, but it affects everybody, right? We operate in New York, one of the most expensive cities to live. So, finding that and getting, a sense of like the issue, which I think, as Ronald said, and which I also said, is like finding common grounds approach to how then we move towards addressing that. Um, I think at this stage, that's where we are. Um, I mean, it's a tough, it's a loaded question, right? But I will tell you something which I'm learning. So I don't want to misrepresent what I'm learning, but essentially, it is a space where I am currently at in Chicago. It's around grassroots organizing and this framework of wedge, where they are talking about, hey, if the other side has been very successfully doing it for centuries, which is divide and conquer, as we know, and they're doing it even now, pitting, us against each other. Why don't we do the same, right? And even understanding like there is a difference between, all the different aspects of supremacy that we're talking about and use the same strategy. So I'm actually excited about that and to see how I can apply it to the work that I do, but also as an organization and to continue having those conversations. It's a lot of learning and to be able to pivot and adapt it to speak to the moment. I think that's what I would say.
Thank you. And whenever
Mhm.
you're ready to start dividing them, hit me up. I'm there with you. So I look forward to doing that. Um, Mansi, um, the number of times I go onto Instagram or social media and see so many of the people I'm connected to or pop up on my screen, and I don't know why my algorithm keeps showing me this, who are apolitical or I don't talk to me about politics and it doesn't impact me, and they want to pull out all my hair whenever they say that because like everything is political, right? But how do you mobilize people who don't see themselves as quote unquote political?
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's, when someone says I'm not political, I'm like, okay, well, unfortunately, or um, it is what it is, but that shapes every part of our lives. Um, I think someone was talking about on ramps earlier, Ronald, like finding a that's not the place you're going to start then with that person. I think that's a really hard argument to have, even if we're like, it's so clear everything about, you say you're not political, but you're complaining about your rent going up or gas prices or all of these things that are impacting us. And that can feel infuriating. But we have to find a different point of entry, point of connection with that person. Um, I think in the kind of work a lot of us do, maybe that's cultural. So, we try to think about how are we also just having social events? How are we participating in like cultural activities, celebrating holidays? Like, because unfortunately or fortunately, but we're always reaching more people in those moments. We had a like great celebration last year for ASAPA's 25th anniversary. Um, and honestly had so much back and forth about, should we do this party? Should we not do this party? Everyone is so tired and overwhelmed, and there's so much happening in the world. But we were like, no, actually that means we really need this. Like, we need something that is just about folks coming together and getting to talk to each other and celebrate. And part of the program was talking about the 25-year history and what we've done and how the organization has evolved. And of course, turnout for the party was much, much better than any meeting we're ever going to have. But that was great. And it did invite some people into the org more deeply, right? Who then like started showing up a little bit more. And then a lot of those people didn't also. It's not like we're going to get everyone to be super engaged. But I think having social events, cultural events, like other ways people can start to engage, offering services or workshops that are, useful to what folks are struggling with in the community. Or we're, currently working on doing some emergency preparedness workshops where we'll also be like giving away some supplies that people might not have as they're thinking about, like, go bags or earthquake preparedness in California. And I think that can be a great moment where we're inviting in a larger group of people than might already be engaged with ASATA. And maybe for some of them, that'll be a stepping point into more engagement, or at least a way that they build a few relationships. They've gotten to know folks, like they're at least connected to us in some way or in our broader networks.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes left, and I'd love to just ask a couple more questions. But wanted to just be mindful of our time today. The first is, we see a lot of what in my opinion, performative activism, right? We see black boxes for George Floyd's murder. We see these No Kings rally where people show up full of energy and passion. We see with so much going on, and it's just hard to keep up with everything going on. And how do you mobilize when tomorrow something else is happening, the next day something else is happening, and people are just impacted in so many different ways. So I would love to hear from all of you of how do we sustain that energy beyond the moment to make sure we're creating movements. And Mamta, I'll start with you, please.
I know. Oh my God. I took a deep sigh when you said that, because it is true, right? And that is the intention as well of the current world order, is to exhaust us. So what we've been, well, something, I mean, some personally in my own practice, I put in well-being, breathing and stuff like that. And we've begun to incorporate that into our work as well. Starting like wellness sessions, which I think a few years ago we really didn't pay much attention to it. It was like, okay, but now we're intentionally doing that. Um, Talking about it, connecting with wellness practitioners who can bring that before we even start a meeting, or other spaces. Um, and also actually accepting that it's okay if you can't, we understand, or not judging somebody just because they don't show up to they don't respond to a call of action. Being okay about that. The other conversation we have is, initially we kind of get into this guilt trip, right? Like when all of these rallies are being held, and you see this elderly white woman in a cane, she's there, or a mother with her young, and then you are like look around and you're like, hey, where are our immigrant population, or where are the people of color? And I think so, yeah, like I said, the little bit of the guilt, but later realizing it's okay. The systems that brought us over here, let's not penalize each other. Let's not be hard on each other, show ourselves grace. And if they're showing up, it was because the system created where people are fearful of being there. It's not because you don't want to be there. And those of us who can, are able to, we show up, right? So I think that's how we kind of look at sustaining. And again, like I said, earlier, celebrating those small achievements, legal immigration has overwhelmingly taken up a lot of the work that we do at Adhikaar. It's always been there, but not to that level that we are seeing. So what we've done is two of our staff, we've gotten them through the 40 hours, BIA accreditation. As I speak, I know we're sending the application, by the way, which I also learned the administration is trying to do away with this program as well. But the point I was trying to get to is just this week, both of our team members passed their exam, and we celebrated with momos, right? So this is what I'm saying, because why we're celebrating was more, hey, now we can help and support more people, because even the legal, partners that we have are stretched to capacity. And just by taking those actions, we're able to, you know, and I think it's all of these. It's just too many. I think we have to be really nimble, be agile, be able to pivot, and just show grace and celebrate.
Thank you. I love that. Ronald, how about you?
Yeah, no, I 100% echo what was just said, Mamta. I think that was really important and how we have to move. I think, what also helps is, maybe I'll just add additions, maybe not necessarily like a different approach, but in addition, it's also like, being clear about our North Star. I think that also helps guide you to, align yourself correctly or be able to prioritize what needs to get done or see clearly through this is not going to be important, right? And then also having trust in our comrades, in other spaces, in other that they got that, right? I don't need to, I think for us, we really focus on fighting for permanent protections. So that sometimes means we're not gonna push to be the lead or fight to take space in the fight that is also necessary. Maybe it's not our end goal of extending a TPS or DACA, right? And it's okay to have other folks take the space and take that lead in that space, right? So that's one. And then I think it's also, again, back to the North Star idea, is just knowing what are you fighting for, what is your end goal. And when you know that, it's clear, it's easier to say, hey, I need to go in this direction or I need to move in this direction in order to ensure where that I'm not adding onto my plate things that aren't needed. And so, yeah, sorry, I'm at a hotel, so if someone knocked on the door, it kind of threw me off there. So
Pretty good.
I'll pass it back. I hope that was made some type of sense.
Perfect.
And then if need
Yes.
be, I will follow up on that. 1 second.
Thank you. Mansi.
Will you remind me what the question is?
Yeah, the question was, how do we move from moments to movements, right? So when we're talking
Yes.
about energy behind just how do we sustain this energy?
hmm Oh, I think consistency helps a lot. That's something that I know for us has been challenging in moments because we're an all active as a SATA. And so really, building systems where folks are like, okay, first Tuesday of every month, we're having this meeting. And then this day is when this working group happens. And just continuing to show up and have those like touch points where people are coming together. And back to that too idea of having to celebrate and have social and elements be a part of it. And like what Mamta was saying with the momos, we always have dinner together after our meetings. And like that has become actually such an important way that like folks are connecting even after the meeting. Sometimes the conversation will continue about something that came up, or it's just time to hang out and eat some good food, or talk about what we want to work on next. And we're now at the point where sometimes even if people can't make a meeting, they know they're welcome to come to dinner and they'll show up, and that's still really helpful. And then I also resonate a lot with Ronald's idea of like being clear about what we're trying to do together and why we're here. So that idea of a North Star of really kind of having that vision and staying focused on it and continuing to move towards that.
Thank you. You all have given such great answers today. I really appreciate it. We're almost out of time, and I just ask one last question in a sentence or two max, please. What gives you hope right now, Ronald?
Yeah, our people. I think even within all the things that we are balancing and trying to navigate, we are still showing up, and we're showing up how we can, where we can, and we're still making things happen. And I think that's where I see the strength. Even I mentioned earlier the example of the Uber driver, but it's like they're still making it happen. All of that. He was talking about how he unfortunately ended up taking a ride because he's new to the city from DC to Baltimore in the middle. It was like midnight. So that is not a fun journey, but he didn't know better. And then he's like, he had to spend the whole night doing rides in Baltimore to make it make sense. But again, even with that, unfortunate mistake, it was this idea of we're going to persist. Right. And that's what our people is about. That is what the immigrant story is about. And that's what I think when I think of, oh, like, it's not looking great right now. It's like it never has been. And we still have always made a way. Being a Haitian American and having Haitian roots, I understand that deeply. But I also know that is a migrant story. All of this country has messed with our countries abroad. We know what that means. Even if it's not U.S., it's Western powers. We know that the situations that we've all experienced that have brought our families, ourselves, or other generations of us here has always been something that we would be home. We would stay home. This would not be our fight. And nonetheless, we've made it where we've added to the communities we are in. We've made communities where we go. And at the same time, we have a strength and a persistence that it's not an administration, it's not an immigration status, that we will be here and will continue to be here. So I think the hope is in the fact that I'm an immigrant and I know what that means.
Thank you. Mansi?
But also start with, our people, and, really broadly and seeing people really like rise to the moment, seeing so many new folks join movements, seeing us try new things, try new experiments, and also like be out in the streets directly confronting ICE across the country. Like those real moments of resistance give me a lot of hope and seeing how our movement is growing. And then also art, just reading and poetry and, connecting to humanity in those ways.
Thank you. Mamta?
Same, ditto, right? Like for us, our members are living proof that we can build power, together, like coming to a new country, settling down, hustling your way around, but yet you can join movements to bring about social change, not just for yourself, but for others that are affected. And very quickly to wrap up, like on Saturday, there was a convening in New York for care workers. Many of our members took a day off from work. Several, they're care workers and they don't have care for their children, brought their children to that space. So I think just seeing that commitment is so beautiful. And at the end, it's people power. The people united will never be defeated. All right, I was waiting for the chant.
I know
I was like, wait, is
this
this our
group
cue?
exercise here.
We can try it again.
We can do it again.
The
Go ahead.
people united will never
Never
be
be
defeated.
I gotta practice.
The flag doesn't help, but we're with you.
We're with you. We're with you.
Absolutely.
And we're getting notes that people are chanting at home, so they're with us on here.
There we go.
Mamta, Ronald, Mansi, thank you all so much for your words of wisdom and your presence and for sharing the incredible work you all are doing. I learned so much and I'm more inspired to go out there and activate and work on behalf of our communities. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's conversation. We hope this was an insightful and engaging end to our Engaged Community series. Before we wrap up, just a few quick notes. There's a live survey we'll email out to better understand the experiences of South Asian immigrants. This is being run by SAAPRI. Your voice is important, and we'd really appreciate if you could take a few minutes to complete this survey. We'll also be compiling notes and key takeaways and sharing them as a resource with attendees, so stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. And I just wanted to leave us with that civic responsibility, as we heard today, isn't something reserved for elections or only moments of crisis. It's something we have to practice each and every day, and how we show up, how we speak, how we stand with one another. And what we heard today is that change doesn't come from any one person or one organization. It comes from communities that are organized, informed, and willing to act. And the challenges we're facing right now are so real, but so is our power to meet them. So wherever we're all coming from, whether we're deeply engaged or just beginning, there's a role for all of us in this work. So start where you are, stay connected, lean on the people, and don't underestimate what collective action can build over time. Thank you again to our incredible panelists, Mamta, Mansi, Ronald, for your leadership and your truths. And thank you all for being here. We hope you leave not just informed, but activated, moved, connected, and ready to build all that comes next. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.